Whose data is it anyway? By Parry and Maltner. And this is very interesting, and we really need the great legal minds of the archives like that of Advocate Marquet to help us in this regard, because I don't think it's been sorted out very, very well. Now, this kind of data between a researcher and respondent, or a reviewer, interviewer and interviewee, there are a lot of implications for the ownership and the control of the research data. There's issues of confidentiality, interviewer and interviewee anonymity, interviewee consent. If I have to talk about this, I will leave them to the authorities. But the point is that today, worldwide, social scientists, they are increasingly encouraged to locate and access and analyze data from archives worldwide, using a range of documentation initiatives, software systems, and network tools. What that just say is that, for instance, we have now been doing research and interviews with people in Buysdorp. Now, somebody in America wants to access that. So there's a worldwide tendency to say that your audio-visual digitized records must be available to anybody in the world. Actually, the ESRC, the Economic and Social Research Council, which is the largest donor in the United Kingdom, requires that all award holders, that they must give their data for archiving, and that the archive should make it accessible to anybody in the world. That seems to be the situation. Now, that brings a lot of problems. Copyright. You have two types of copyright. You have copyright of spoken words, and that belongs to the speaker or the interviewee. And then you have that of the recording. And the recording doesn't belong to the researcher. It belongs to the institution in which the researcher is employed. So if I go and do interviews, it belongs, and UNISA has given me money to do that, then UNISA owns the record. It seems so. Now, of course, copyright can be transferred, and an interviewee can license the researcher to use the data by means of a consent form. But now this is for me very strange. I'm still on time, so I've got 2 slides left. Okay. The fact is that even though the interviewee has signed a consent form, that interviewee retains certain moral rights. And that is that he or she should not be subjected to derogatory treatment. For me, I must say it sounds a bit strange, because if you, sir, publish a book now or an article, now I quote from that and I say, I don't agree with you, you're on the wrong path there, I don't agree with you. But I may not do that with an interview, you see. I may not do that with an interview. I may not publish, I interviewed Mr. So-and-so. I don't agree with what he said. He was actually talking nonsense, or I think he was a bit drunk, to tell you the truth. And, so you might actually not do that. So I don't understand that. When consent has been given, then that person must be able to, you may be able to criticize your interviewee, but it doesn't seem legally to be possible. Now, the problem is so you interview somebody, you get consent. In Buysdorp, where we were, we first had to get consent from the Familieraad. Then we get consent to interview people. Then to interview them, they had to sign a consent form. Now, again, when we have now written an article or a book or whatever about it, then they must give consent again. Now, the point is, if you now Then we hand it over to the archives. Now the archives put it there, it's accessible to anybody, but it's not, it's anonymous. So now somebody from Los Angeles wants to use that interview, but they don't even know who the person was who did that interview. How are they going to get to that person to get consent? So I'm so glad somebody is going, I see Advocate Mark is ready to answer all those difficult questions. Okay, so because data archives worldwide stipulate that personal information concerning research participant is to be kept confidential. And now I don't know how this worked. I had 24 slides and now there are 22 slides. Okay, now it's a good thing. People think it's a good thing that you get consent beforehand and then get consent when it is going to be published, but there's no provision made for guidance in issues in archiving. Where does the consent lie? And I say we will get a paper on that. Now, given the importance of maintaining the respondent anonymity, as I've just now said, when somebody from outside, remember there's now, the archive must make all information accessible to people, but anonymously. So how are you going now to ask the consent of this person? When you have his interview, you have access to that interview, you can digitize it, you can do all kinds of things with it, but you don't know who had it. How are you going to have it? Now, my slide 21, 23 and 24 were a summary of this also. So since my time is up, I cannot not summarize. So those of you who just came in or now thought maybe this is important to listen to, sorry, no summary now. I don't know how that happened because I checked it over and over again. Oh, here it is. Sorry, sir, just a minute. No, I can't understand it. It's very strange. What, summary? Okay, let me just summarize, really 2 minutes. Archiving oral history research through publications is not enough. We just preserve 6.5% of it. And when papers are given by practitioners, by learners, by organic intellectuals, we really need to archive those papers or the video clips. Secondly, recorded interviews need to be regarded as records. I know, although the law regards them as such, positivistic and objectivist historians do not. Thirdly, oral interviews need to be digitized to prevent plagiarism. Fourthly, interviews need to be digitized for referencing and cross-referencing since transcriptions are flat and expensive. Number 5, oral histories need to be made available to the public and broader international readership as a celebration of history, as people speaking for themselves, therapy, something as the only, and sometimes as the only witness against apartheid silencing, and as a correction on one-sided white histories, of which we may have too many in our archives. Number 6, the archivists should become archivist scholars to contextualize and interpret symbolism in the oral record or not. Number 7, the last one, you know, I'm a pastor too, so 7 is a very nice number to finish with. Digitizing oral sources moves cataloging, just cataloging, to indexing, to content referencing, from content referencing to meaning referencing, from a text transcript to cross-referencing, and from linear searching to relational mapping. Amen.
Here I am, Prof.
Oh, thank God.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. We are doing well as far as time is concerned. I just want to indicate to you that the program has changed slightly. You can take a seat, Prof. I just want to indicate that the program has changed slightly. 1:15, we're supposed to have presentation on Remember Your Descendants. And the next one was digitization of the SABC archives. We'll no longer have these two presentations. They have been replaced. Now, without any waste of time, because the one that is coming now is a virtual presentation. So I think where they are ready at the moment. Can I have indication that they are ready? Thank you so much. I'm requesting you to note questions and comments for all these presenters, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. As we move to the next item, which is World War exhibition, it will be virtual by Prof. Stefan Mans. It's a global, it's a professor of global history at Arton University, Birmingham, UK. It's also a research associate at the University of Pretoria and a fellow of Royal Historical Society. His latest book has been published by Oxford University Press and is entitled Enemies in the Empire, Civilian Internment in the British Empire during the First World War. The related public engagement activities, which Professor Mans will present today, have been funded by the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. Can I just ask if you're able to see and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. I'm now trying to share the presentation. 1 second. Okay, can you all see the presentation?
Yes, from our side, everything is clear.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you very much for having us for your conference, which sounds absolutely fascinating. Especially the digital aspect of the conference, where we hopefully can contribute an interesting paper through a project which we've just launched. That's myself and Dr. Ann Sampson, who will speak after me, who's been a project participant. The project title is South Africa World War I, Digital and Virtual Experiences. I'll say a few words about the project content first, and then we'll talk about the launch in KwaZulu-Natal last November. So the project is both digital and analog. This is from the homepage of the project, where you can read that the importance of the First World War for the history of South Africa, and that the project is trying to reinvent commemoration of the First World War for the digital age, making it more widely accessible and socially inclusive. So what we are trying to construct is a wider story, which is not just a white story on the European battlefront. It's a wider story about how the First World War actually impacted on South African society and the country as a whole. So the project consists, I'll just go back, if you look at the top bit here, the menu. So it's got three main outputs of the project. One are 2 virtual reality experiences, which I'll talk about later. Then heritage tour up and various education packages. So we're appealing to a wide range of users through the project. In the end, it's not just a project about the First World War, it's also a project about digital in the heritage sector. And this really comes to the fore here. I'll first talk about the virtual reality experiences. The aims of these are, as I just said, technological innovation in the heritage sector to make both users and institutions who are working in the heritage sector familiar with that technology, which will be probably the technology of the future. You've just seen the news about Apple launching its new virtual reality headset. So it's certainly a technology which we all should be aware of. And the other aim is really to create an immersive experience of the First World War. So you're not just not just reading something or looking at analog panels, but you actually, or users are immersing themselves in that experience. In terms of functionality, you can watch the two experiences on the project website, or through the project website and on YouTube. And that is through the project team. I'll explain all this in a minute. So one experience is generally about South Africa. That's the left one here, South Africa in the First World War. And the second one, which I'll talk about in a minute, is a more specific topic about an internment camp in the First World War in Pietermaritzburg. The second output, the heritage tour, Anne Samson will talk about this later in detail. The aims of this are really digital preservation of sources and also locations, to make these locations accessible to wider audiences through digital means. And it's also hopefully going to attract a little bit of tourists who will actually going to be visiting those sites. Those are sites attached in some way or the other to the First World War. And then there are a couple of learning resources which will be tackled later as well, education packs and various other outputs. The aim of these is to create an accessible curriculum and a decolonized curriculum. Okay, so now for the project launch. This was in KwaZulu-Natal Museum around Armistice Day last year. The museum provided two large exhibition halls for the exhibition, and it's a combination of analog and virtual and digital exhibiting. On the left-hand side, you can see the outside, the entrance to the museum and the announcement of the and in the museum, you can see that the kind of technological aspects are very much integrated into the overall collections. So here in the middle and on the right bottom hand side, you've got the virtual reality poster here, but you've also got a glass case here with First World War medical equipment, for example. So it's very much a blended experience which visitors experience there. Okay, now in a more concrete way, what does it actually entail? So I'll just take you through it. It requires a bit of training, but this is very light touch. It's a straightforward thing with these kind of goggles that are provided by the project team or can be purchased. On the left hand side, the top picture here shows some training with museum staff. So that was the days before the exhibition launch. We came along and did some training around these. And the top one in the middle then shows users engaging with the virtual reality experience. I should then also say, in terms of a blended experience, that you can see the exhibition panels here in the background and on the wall. And you see different colored poppies as well in the back here as well. So there's the tactile experience for users and the virtual one as well. This usually works best if you do that kind of blended experience. And just on the right-hand side, there was some Zulu just to indicate that we're really the remembrance should be a socially inclusive one. Okay, the bottom line of images shows some of the schoolwork we did. So we went into various schools in KwaZulu-Natal around Pietermaritzburg, did some workshops with young learners, and you can see them watching the here and very much enjoying the experience. And here are some young learners in the museum or at the museum as well. So it's really adaptable to different locations. So we've now launched it, and the whole installation and the experience can now travel across South Africa through archives, libraries, museums, schools, or other public spaces. And this can be really done from very small scale to large scale. If you're interested, you can just get in touch with us and we'll be able to adapt this to respective locations. Okay, I'll now talk a little bit about the role of archives within that virtual reality. So you really have to think of it as a pipeline from the original archival research and then to analog and virtual reality exhibiting. So the left-hand photograph shows this one I took in the Pretoria National Archive, in the South African National Archives in Pretoria in 2015. As your former president. This is when I was researching my book on enemies in the empire, civilian internment in the British Empire during the First World War. This is a global take on the issue of civilian internment camps and various for the First World War, and then were, after the outbreak, considered enemy aliens and then interned. And these are part of a larger global story whereby around 50,000 of those enemy aliens were interned in empire locations. The next step was then the question how to communicate that story to the wider public. And this was my first engagement with KwaZulu-Natal Museum in 2019, where we jointly created an analog exhibition around this topic entitled Behind the Wire. And the image on the right-hand side shows me doing some workshops with students again and showing the panels and especially the significance of that topic for South African history as well. I did write about various locations around the world, but in South Africa, the theme obviously resonates with viewers and users because of the internment history going back to the South African War just 15 years before the First World War. So it's really about the continuity and the significance of place within that story that rang a bell with visitors. Now, just one example how archives have been used to construct that, or put together that analog exhibition. This is just one excerpt or one snippet from one of the panels. The panel is called Escape. So some of these prisoners obviously tried to escape, and some of them in Fort Napier dug these tunnels. And this is an escape plan, which I found in the Pretoria National Archives. A tunnel you can read, the top line here, barbed wire fence, and then roadway, then drains. So the prisoners really tried to dig a tunnel into the drains and from there tried to escape. And this is obviously referenced on the panel National Archives of South Africa, as you can read here. So this is a typical example of archive to public engagement. I'll now say a few words about the virtual reality experience on internment. There's one specifically on that internment story. So what we did with a digital creative company who specializes in these kind of productions is to recreate digitally the camp or reconstruct it in virtual reality. So as you put on your goggles, you actually find yourself within that camp. Everything in the experience or in the film is based on archival material. In this case, taken from the National Archives of South Africa, both in Pretoria and Pietermaritzburg, from the KZN Museum Archive. They've got a wonderful collection about their local internment camp, the Fort Napier camp, with photographs and written sources, quite exciting and underexplored. Then from UK National Archives and the German National Archives. So a range of archival material which we've recreated as a roughly 8-minute virtual reality. And just some examples, screenshots here. So the top image here shows the huts, or the barrack huts where the prisoners stayed. And prisoners in the camp actually did tried to spend their time creatively, and some of them started painting. And we found some of those paintings in the archives. We put them on a table here, and this then creates the experience for the user of being one of the internees and engaging with that kind of creative work. This is just one screenshot here. Another example is the inside of the huts, which we also, what does it feel to be stuck in one of those huts for years? So we recreated this on the left-hand side here, the bottom photograph, an inside of the hut. And on the right-hand side, you see, I don't know whether you can see this very well, it's a bed, some sheets here, but on the bed we put a letter and some images. And this image, it's too small here, but it shows one of the anti-German, anti-enemy alien riots in Durban in May 1915. So we put one of those photographs on the bed and a letter. And then, if you can read this line, we've got actors reading those letters from the wife of one of the internees outside the camp and the internee inside the camp. And this line reads, "I know in my heart you are inside there somewhere." And there's a kind of exchange, a written exchange between the prisoner and his wife outside the camp. This is to immerse, not just in a kind of factual way the users, but also in an emotional way. And that's the one advantage virtual reality gives you. It immerses in emotional ways. And this is very much the reaction we got from users. Here are just a couple of quotes which we got orally, but also written in feedback questionnaires. For example, "Oh no, this is so sad." So it's really that emotional immersion. "I felt I was there physically. Everything felt so real. The experience was amazing. Other parts were scary." So again, emotions being felt. But then also understanding. I now have an understanding and a feel of how the World War experience was like. So it's that both understanding and being able to relate to that past period. A wonderful educational experience for the younger generation, older too. So this is the generations issue. We're trying to appeal to both younger and older generations. So it really goes beyond historical knowledge and connects users to social issues such as violence against minorities, empathy with the enemy, and shows the relevance today. It needs to be mixed with analog outputs, and overall is really about innovation in the heritage sector. So as I said, we've just launched it. If you want to show it in your own institution, please feel free to get in touch either with myself or with KZN Museum. I put here the email of the curator at the museum, the colleague I've been working with together. And this concludes my part, and I'm looking forward to some discussion afterwards. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing now and hand over to Anne, who will talk a little bit more about other outputs.
Thank you, Prof. Can I
Thank you,
introduce
Stefan. Could you
hello?
actually continue sharing your screen, please? It will be easier.
Yes, I will.
Ben?
Yes,
Thank
sorry.
Hello. Can I introduce you, please?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Our next presenter is Dr. Anne Sampson. She's an independent historian who runs a Great War in Africa Association. She grew up in South Africa, where she did her schooling and degree at the University of Pretoria and UNISA. She completed a PhD at Royal Holloway University of London, and it's a fellow of the Royal Historical Society, as well as qualified TVET teacher in the UK, and has published widely on the First World War in Africa and can regularly be found in the South African archives. Visits home. Thank you. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to join you from afar. Wish we were there. So Stefan had looked at the broader aspect of the project, and particularly the virtual reality. I want to focus in on the heritage tour, the heritage app aspect, and the learning resources, focusing specifically on South Africa in the First World War, so widening the story from the internment. And one of the things, if we could change slides, please, Stefan. Yeah, there we go. One of the things that was quite important in this, in putting the project together and the heritage app, as well as the education pack, the virtual reality, was the diversity of source that needed to be consulted. Having caught the end of the previous speaker talking about white archives dominating in South Africa, yes, this is the case, but with a bit of creativity and looking widely, we can find material that is inclusive across the South African spectrum. And for this, things like newspapers, memoirs, I've got one of the images that you can see on the screen is from the memoir of Stimela, Jingo Stimela, who had served in the First World War, and we've got his record as a representative. He wasn't quite from South Africa, he was from Lesotho, but he served in the South African Native Labour Corps, or SANLC, which went across to Europe. And we've also been able to use newspapers. They have been a valuable source in understanding and accessing the South African record, as well as English newspapers. We've got Zulu and Xhosa newspapers as well, which can be accessed online if you've got access to certain of the library catalogues, but also in places like the South African Library, and also local libraries. We mustn't forget the importance of local libraries in South Africa for material. And then there are things like posters, which tend to sadly be more available in the UK than in South Africa, even though they are about South African material. For some reason, they haven't been retained as easily in South Africa. Material on the apartheid era posters from all sides is available in South Africa, but from the First World War, it dominates in Britain. If we move on, we've got a variety of other types of sources which can be collated and brought together in a way that will help users understand. And these are images that are all in the education pack that we have put together and which can be downloaded, used online or printed by teachers and learners or others who are interested in the topic. Statistics and data available from documents such as census material, hospital records, camp records, etc., which can be found at the National Archives, local archives again, or published material that government put out is very, very useful. And we mustn't forget the importance of photographs. Apart from the photographs being significant in terms of creating the virtual reality, they open up windows and avenues into understanding and seeing South African history in a very different way, particularly when the written archive is a very white-dominated archive. So, for example, here we've got 2 photographs from the South African Railways and Harbours magazine, government publication of the day, but it proves to us that we had black labour and huge amounts of black involvement in the South African First World War experience, particularly on the home front. And this is a group of men who are busy building a railway, which was crucial for the South West Africa campaign, which they built in record time. So that proves to us that it wasn't just a white man's war. Similarly, cars were very new in South Africa at the time. It was still very much horse travel, oxen travel. Trams were making an input. And this is one of the first ambulances, motorized ambulances that we had in South Africa. Current research into Pretoria suggests that in about 1916, we only had 25 motorized vehicles in the capital city. And other places had similar sorts of numbers. So a very different world to what we live in today. So photographs playing a very important part. If we move on, thanks, Stefan. One of the challenges we've had is acknowledging the past, and this is can be quite a sensitive area in South Africa, as we all know. But while it is a difficult and can be a difficult aspect to look at, it also provides huge opportunities for exploring new avenues of history. I was quite surprised when we were looking at the heritage at the project, and we went to the school curriculum, that it was still very much the same as what I had been taught back in South Africa in the 1980s, which was very British focused. It didn't tell us anything about South Africa's involvement directly. However, with a bit of creative thinking and knowing that South Africa has its own identities, etc., we started digging, taking the British themes and ideas and literally looking for the South African equivalents. And this opened up amazing windows for me. I've been on such an emotional roller coaster through the archive, online and physically, in terms of finding out aspects of South Africa's history. And here, one of the curriculum outputs is about the role of suffragettes in Britain during the First World War. Now, in South Africa, we didn't have suffragettes directly. They didn't use the term, but we did have female movers and shakers who eventually got the vote. And we've got people there like Charlotte McSekey and Mary Fitzgerald, who was one of the early trade unionist activists in Johannesburg. So South Africa has got its own story. And if you go and follow their individual stories through Olive Schreiner as well, you will find a whole range of new material that opens up the South African story. So what we've been able to do through this project, going into the archives in terms of the virtual reality as well as the heritage app and the education resource, is bring to light some of the invisible and hidden histories, and hopefully we'll be able to do a lot more, and hopefully encourage others to do so too. Moving swiftly on, also in acknowledging our past, there are very traditional ways that we've remembered the past, particularly through the veteran associations, They have become more inclusive over the years, particularly the South African Legion. There was a Mendi Association at one point. I haven't been able to see that continues, but we've got the Moths, the Veterans Associations, but we've also got other ways of remembering which are becoming more popular in an interesting way, such as novels. And we've got a diverse range of authors in South Africa or from South Africa writing about the topics. And we've also got the poetry, which is traditionally oral traditions in South Africa. And those have been translated as well into English and other languages, quite often appearing in the newspapers. I found quite a few in the Zulu and Xhosa newspapers of the day. And then we have things like events such as the Comrades Marathon, which few people know originated as a memorial event to the First World War in Africa and the men who had suffered, South Africans who had suffered through the East Africa campaign in particular. And what is really interesting in delving into this, which came out through the KZN exhibition, but also through other research, was that although black males and white women were only allowed to participate in the marathon officially from about 1985, they are recorded as having run unofficially right from about the 1930s. Which is absolutely remarkable. And in reading some of the histories of the Comrades Marathon, you find that local populations, local businesses were handing out awards to these unofficial participants, which have been recorded but not officially recognized. And so things change, times change. And we see that more recently in the new memorial, which is going up in Cape Town by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, where they identified 900 odd names, and I think it's grown a bit more since then, of people whose names for a very sad reason had not been included on initial memorials. It was a change in South African government situation, but also the death of one of the recorders. As a result of this more recent discovery, the Commonwealth War Graves have commissioned a memorial, which is currently going through its final planning permission to go into Company Gardens in Cape Town. And it is very different to the traditional memorial that we associate with the Commonwealth War Graves. And in the virtual reality, you can actually see it come to life because both Commonwealth War Graves Commission and the architects gave us permission to add this into the history of the past. So as Stefan quite often likes to remind us, we're looking into the future as well through virtual reality. And then if we move on, so we're moving history from documents into electronic format, into a virtual format, future format. And this is literally hot off the press. It shows how, moving on to the Heritage app, how we can relate history to the time that we're dealing with. So the top row, effectively on the top, the map and the piece next to it is already on the Heritage app. It is a piece, although it focuses initially on KZN, we broadened out with a few tangents into places like Bloemfontein, Pretoria, Polokwane, but also the railways and the seas. And knowing that we might be joining you today in Killy, and also because I put a piece in very quickly today about the role of Kimberley, particularly in the First World War. And Kimberley was quite important because initially, and you'll pick this up in the virtual reality, that the diamond mines had to close quite early on because of the war. People weren't going to be wearing diamonds, so there was no need to sell diamonds. And Kimberley then suffered an economic challenge as a lot of the mine workers then moved up to the gold mines in Johannesburg in order to continue making a living. Similarly, linking in with the internment aspect that Stefan was talking about earlier, we had attacks on German, well, people who were perceived to be German just because of their name. And Ernest Oppenheimer, who was the mayor of Kimberley, had his house attacked, despite being mayor, having been a naturalized British citizen for over 20 years, and having recruited the Kimberley Regiment, which went on to serve in Southwest Africa. Also significantly, Kimberley was the home for the Cape Corps, which was the Cape Coloured Battalion's corps, which had served in the First World War, both in East Africa, Egypt, and Palestine. And what I've done there on the bottom row is extract some information from the Commonwealth War Graves Association, Commonwealth War Graves Commission website, which shows the basic information of the numbers of people who had a direct Kimberley link and who are buried in Kimberley. And you can see a summary there of the numbers. Also significantly, they have digitized a lot of their documents, particularly around Africa and the individuals. Anybody on their list will have an entry somewhere in the archive. And this has opened up new avenues again, that Kimberley had 2 hospitals specifically for the Cape Corps. Now, I only discovered that this morning effectively, and I'm looking forward to getting into the archives in about a month's time in South Africa to go and find out more about those 2 hospitals, because up until now, I haven't come across them mentioned in other sources. It seems that this Commonwealth War Graves record is the place we have it. And as Stefan mentioned as well, it's a hope that the Heritage app will enable people to help tourism within South Africa. We do have to put the claimer on that you can do it online or on foot, providing it is safe. It is not just South Africa who has these safety issues. There are other parts of the world as well, and being able to access material in one or other format, I think, is very crucial. It also allows record of documents or further investigation to happen through hyperlinks, etc. So, and hopefully people going to visit the towns and places will be able to shed more light on some of these. I've just touched the top of the iceberg with this and with the findings that the team have come up with. And so in conclusion, if we move on to the final one, where recording our past is effectively what we've done and what we do as historians, archivists, researchers, whatever title we want to use. And it's important to, I think, moving forward, that we remember the hybrid, the blended version. I'm not a very virtual reality type person. I've learned a huge amount, and I understand and value the moves forward. I'm very much grounded in the documents, but I see this as an exciting way to record the past for the present generations and future generations. And we need to curate these with as much attention as what we do with the paper documents, and keeping the integrity of our past. And it's important as well, Stefan's mentioned international archives. We've also got our local national archives, both at Pretoria, well, not both, Cape Town, Pretoria, KZN have been hugely helpful in putting all of this together, as well as local archives. I haven't used the Kimberley archive, but it is important to recognize our local archives. I've used other local archives, and also the oral history. South Africa is incredibly rich in oral histories, and as the previous speaker was saying, those need to be valued and treated as a real document. And I think digitizing them would be a brilliant idea. And we need to do more about digitizing archives in order to open up the access to the diverse populations that we've got. So I'm going to suggest that using an old UK National Archives project where they had archives engaged, archives created, and I think it's still relevant, go and explore your archives, and you might just find some answers to one of the themes that runs through our South Africa World War I project, which asks the question, who will be my friend? and hopefully you will discover as many exciting things that I have, showing how whilst South Africa is so diverse, so separate in many ways, we actually have a huge amount in common. And that is what has come to life for me through archives and this project. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sampson. Colleagues, we have 3 presentations already. The first one was on oral history as a form of archiving by Prof. Landman. I think you have noted questions and comments there. Number 2, we had a presentation on World War exhibition by Prof. Mans, the first one who presented, and the second one is Dr. Sampson. So I need you to note that so that when we come to time of questions and answers, it becomes simple for you to comment or question. We move. Now we are getting to the presentation on Phetolelo, literary translation as a form of repatriation and recovery. Lessons from SPU/DSAC initiative. It will come from Prof. Mataga. He is an associate professor of museums and heritage studies at Sol Plaatje University. He researches and teaches on issues related to community involvement in museum and heritage. Jesmael loves travel and reading, and his sense of home is split between the mountains of Lesotho and the Karoo Plains of the Northern Cape and the savanna woodlands of the southern Zimbabwe. His recent writing include books, articles on museums and social justice, heritage and communities, as well as heritage and decolonization. That is Prof. Mataga. The second one, because there are 2 in this presentation, it's Mr. Mukai. He is a lecturer and creative writing in African writing at Sol Plaatje University. He is the editor of Sol Plaatje's Mohudi, History Criticism and Celebration, and Sol T. Plaatje, A Life in Letters. He is a fellow at the University of Iowa and in the US, and a research affiliate at Chikinya Chaka Center at Wits University. He has written 3 award-winning novels. I'll hand it over to you, Prof. Mataga, and then immediately you are done, it will be Mr. Mukai. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the introductions, and it's always interesting to think about how you say about yourself to people in some struggle to do that. I just want to thank you, the organizers. My role here is to just give a context of the presentation we are going to have with my colleague and brother, Sabata Mukai. And we were really intrigued by the theme of your engagements this year, which sort of made references to something that as university and other institutions we are struggling and trying to get our heads around. Artificial intelligence. I've seen some of my students here and they know the kinds of conversations we are having around some of these things. Before Sabata comes, I just want to give a bit of a context of the project that he's going to report on, which was related to translation of English novels back to Setswana, and we call this repatriation. But I want to set this background by talking about Soul Plaatje University, for some of us who may have seen the buildings but have not heard the full story. So Soul Plaatje University materializes around 2014. We start the university with about 114 students. We're currently sitting with about 4,500 to about 5,000 students with almost a fully fledged campus. We were formed in a very interesting era around 2014, 2015, called Fees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall movements is when we were born. What we took from this interesting moment was the questioning of the idea of a university. What is the role of a university and its fancy buildings and so-called learned professors and lecturers? I think our children forced us to ask ourselves these questions in 2015. What should a university look like? What should we be taught in universities? What should be the role of a university? What kind of context do we teach our students in? Whether you agreed with them or you didn't, you were forced to think about it. So SPU is born in this moment, and we were deliberate in trying to engage with these things. And one of the ideals was that SPU had been formed with a sort of social justice agenda located in the Northern Cape, which is itself a very rich province, culturally, linguistically, and otherwise. So we really targeted our strategic interventions in our academic programming, in our research, as well as in our community engagement, to have that thrust of social engagement, a university within its own community, if you like. And part of our thinking was to draw upon the Northern Cape's rich material, and particularly its linguistic heritage, whether you call them indigenous languages, African languages, local languages. We were just trying to do something different from what English had done. If any one of us has read Ngugi wa Thiong'o's seminal work around this issue of what we call the language question in Africa, and the histories of language and how language had been approached. So this is what brought us to this project that Sabata is going to talk about. What could a university do in a context where you are located in an area, in a province that has got very rich linguistic and creative writing landscapes? Some of the greatest writers of this country have come from this province. Soul Plaatje, of course, and many others. So this led us to a partnership, and I see my brother here smiling and looking at me, Ndadepenyo Modise, and the many conversations with his team when we were talking about this thing, and the kind of partnership that grew out of this with the department and the university. What we ended up with was an agreement in which we were going to work between ourselves, but also include sort of the writing, creative writing community in the province, and sort of a global, Sabata can talk about this, a global network of writers writers who have written something to engage with the local communities. And the project was centered around 5 pillars, if I remember well, 5 strands. The project that Sabata will talk about, the Repatriation of Letters project, the Northern Cape Writers Festival, the writers' workshops that we held around the provinces and the districts, and the SPU Summer School of Writing. So just to give you a context, so we are reporting on this. The project has been done. We have done our reporting, I think, But we have taken a step further to write about this in a book which has recently been published by the HSRC, which is called Universities, Society and Development, African Perspectives of Community Engagement in Secondary Cities. And as I sit down again to thank our partners and their teams for the kind of work that we managed to achieve, and I think we did great. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much, Professor Mataga. And my focus will be so much on the repatriation of letters, which has been a very important project out of the partnership that the university has been having with the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture in the Northern Cape. So I'd like to talk about the roots or the genesis of the repatriation of letters and why we are talking about translation of literature as repatriation and not translation as such. I'd like to quote two scholars, colleagues from Northwest University, Elian Powe and Professor Shole Shole. They wrote in a book titled Solplakis Muhudi History, Criticism, Celebration, which has been edited by myself and Professor Brian Whelan. Their chapter is titled Maropeng on Repatriating Muhudi as a Setswana novel. Many of you will know that Muhudi is a novel by Solplaki, first English novel to be published by a Black South African, first full-length English novel by a Black South African, which turned 100 years in the year 2020. They did write that in the wake of imperialism and colonization, African languages became pariahs in the native lands, in their native lands, subjugated, marginalized, diminished, and eventually replaced by colonial languages, particularly as languages of artistic expression. And this was basically to paint a picture, a dire picture of the state of African literature. Solplaki himself, in the preface of Muhudi, that novel, did say in the beginning of that preface that South African literature has hitherto been almost exclusively European. And by saying it was exclusively European, he was not only talking about what South African literature tried to present to the world, but also about the language in which it was presented to the world. What Chinua Achebe said later was what was a colonization of one people's story by another. So also my colleague Jasmail referred to Ngugi's seminal work in decolonizing the mind, politics of language in African literature. Ngugi did say the future of the African novel, which is what we are trying to respond to through repatriation of letters. The future of the African novel is dependent on the willing writer, ready to invest time and talent in African languages, and a willing translator, willing to invest time and talent in the art of translating, and a willing publisher ready to invest time and money, or a progressive state which would overhaul the current neoliberal colonial linguistic policies. And that is what the repatriation of letters seeks to do. What also Chinua Achebe said is the new ways of writing about Africa, repatriating Africa or reinvesting Africa or the continent and its people with the humanity, free at last of those stock situations and stock characters, never completely human, that had dominated African literature for years and years. And so what we did, we then looked for a number of books that have been written in English by Setswana-speaking authors. And naturally, coming from Sol Plaatje University, Sol Plaatje's novel was the first one, Mhudi. So we looked for novels, and not only novels, but books written in English by Setswana-speaking authors, and commissioned translation into the author's mother tongue. Hence, we're using the word repatriation. So if we were to say we're translating English novels into Italian or into isiZulu or into Xitsonga, they were going to be translation. But when we are translating into the author's mother tongue, is repatriation, meaning that if we follow an argument made by Shole Shole and Eileen Powe, that Mhudi is a book written by a patriotic Motswana, which has as its subject Botswana, set in a Setswana-speaking community, and it has not a single English-speaking character throughout that novel. It could have not been conceived in English. And therefore, it only made sense that one can conclude that this novel was written in Setswana. Or, as an argument was made in 1974 at the University of the North by Recius Melato Malope, Mhudi, an English novel or a novel written in English, is in essence a Setswana novel. When you translate Mhudi into English, into Setswana, you are repatriating it from linguistic exile in English and returning it to its native linguistic base, which is Setswana, hence it is repatriation. Hence, we are not saying it is translation. So the 6 books that we then looked for are Ellen Kuzwayo's Call Me Woman, Ellen Kuzwayo A Morolong from Tabancho wrote this book, Call Me Woman, and then we found a translator who speaks Setswana to translate it into Setswana or repatriate it back into Setswana. A colleague at Sol Plaatje University, Richard Molwele, and then Mhudi repatriated into Setswana, Palesa Seleke, a former colleague at Sol Plaatje University. Kagiso Lesego Molope, who gave us a beautiful story from the northern townships of Tshwane. This book betrays my brother, translated by Northern Cape writer and translator Lorato Trok, repatriated as Masaika Tegang Agang Khonne. This book betrays my brother, repatriated into Setswana. Matters of Life and Death, a story from Mamelodi, repatriated, written by Lesego Malepe and repatriated by Shole Shole as Mamukhashwa. And you'll notice something about the titles. These are not direct translations. They are reimagined, transcreated, because you look at translation in this sense as reimagination. It has a freeing ability. So you do not look for equivalents. Let me make an example. Lesego Malepe, for instance, would refer to somebody as an uncle in this book, in this novel. But when Shole Shole repatriates this book, he will then have to find out which uncle, because in Lesego Malepe's world, there are many uncles. English knows only one uncle because it is too limited. As a conveyor of African stories, English has got too many limitations. It gives you one uncle, it groups all of them. But then you have uncle, which is the father's younger brother. You have an uncle, which is the father's older brother. You have an uncle, which is the mother's brother. And they all have different roles in the families. And they all have different responsibilities towards you. And in his repatriation of this novel, he has to find that out. And the repatriation becomes a free act. It becomes liberatory in its process. So that is what we have done. And among the translators or the repatriators, only Tuelo Gabonewe translated his own book. So Tika Fayabaneng was initially sarcophagus. And this exception happened because Tuelo Gabonewe wrote the English novel when he was doing his master's degree at Wits. And the first review in the Sunday Times said that this is a Setswana novel written in English. And I remember when I read the manuscript myself, I said to him, I so wish you had the opportunity to write this in Setswana. And when he was given an opportunity to write this in his mother tongue, he felt so free. And he did not have to look for equivalents. So when you say to somebody, hell no, he's not going to look for an equivalent of hell no. It has a different archive altogether. So he will say Nkaitoma Sekgono, which has its own archive, its own history. And so that is what we have done. And it performs a number of functions. One is that we have a dire shortage of Setswana novels in the country, quality Setswana novels that are in the mainstream. A lot of people who are writing in African languages write with the intention to be prescribed for schools. When you are done with the school, you do not go to the bookstore to buy a novel to read at home, just like a person will buy an English novel just to read for pleasure. We have that dire shortage. So we're making available that number of novels. But secondly, we are also contributing to the development of languages, because a language that is not written dies naturally. We do not have the opportunity to increase the vocabulary. And so in doing this, we are performing that function as well. The new words do not come on their own. They come because we are put in a tight corner where we have to create them. And so that is what happens with the repatriation of letters. So that is what has happened. A number of these titles are done now. The first one to be launched was Tika Fayabaneng by Tuelo Gaboneo. Taung Wells by Martin Kuboekai has also been done. Mamu Khashwa, Matters of Life and Death is done also. Kagiso Molope, this book betrays my brother. Masaika Tehang Ahang Khonne has been done. So only few of them are yet to be done. So the project is still ongoing. But our hope is that this kind of project will be emulated throughout the country, if not the continent. And that will, in many ways, repatriate our stories, reverse the colonization of our stories by the other. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Without any waste of time, I know very well that you are busy noting the questions and the comments. Let's move to the next presentation on records management standards across the province of local government level. It will be presented by Ms. J. Klut from Salga and Mr. Taboli Halametwa from Salga. You can come forth for your presentation as organized.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow scholars, distinguished guests, in 2014, a national seminar was held by the Auditor General, where all sectors were called in, including public departments, as well as private institutions, provincial, as well as national departments. There was a call by the Auditor General to get our records in order. This, at the time, area that was left largely untouched and neglected. At this point, Salga Northern Cape decided to embark on a journey throughout the province. Our main aim was to assess and support municipalities which were struggling to get their record systems up and running, and to strengthen those registries that where we possibly could. As our mandate, Salga has to be responsive and supportive to our member municipalities. It was therefore an initiative that we set out to undertake to determine the state of registries in the province and to come up with innovative ideas and solutions as how we would strengthen them. At the time, we were the only province running with this initiative. We were the only province that shifted our focus from internal registry to external support. Today, our presentation is a brief overview of the work that we have done thus far, which would include support visits, records assessments, hosting quarterly forums, sharing of best practices, and building a network of professionals that regularly interchange ideas and solutions amongst themselves. We have also come up with a toolkit and have built an alliance with several stakeholders like CETA, LG CETA, Auditor General, Premier's Office, Cogstar, Vodacom, Standard Bank, MTN, just to mention a few. The records forums which were held were so successful that the Northwest as well as KZN followed suit. And now the forum has grown to include them as members as well. We would like to thank DSEC and the Provincial Archives for making us part of this auspicious event. And we look forward to working with the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, as well as the Provincial Archives going forward. And we would like to shift our focus towards strengthening this alliance. And on that note, I would like to start the presentation. I will go to page 3, slide 3. I cannot see the slides, so I'll just be speaking and I'll just be calling out the slide numbers. Okay, so we will go into the desired long-term plan that SALGA has set out. We would like to see our municipalities becoming more compliant with records management applications and systems, consistent to the where possible, municipalities should explore the shared service methodology as a functional record and document management service. So we are looking into sharing this. Municipal peer learning arrangements should be taken into consideration for sharing of information amongst municipalities. Records management and the resultant service delivery and information sharing problems can only be resolved if management actively intervenes to create a working culture. I will go to slide number 5. Records information, records, what is a record? It is recorded information regardless of the form or medium. It is evidence of a transaction preserved for the evidential information it contains. Records management is fundamental for good governance, effective and efficient administration. It forms the basis for formulating policy, managing resources, and delivering service to the public. Records management also provides a basis for accountability and protecting the rights of individuals. On slide number 7. On slide number 7, this is meant directly for records practitioners. We can take this home to our records members. It is a situational analysis of municipalities in the Northern Cape Province. Where do we start off? We start off with the appointment of records managers, we move on to the approval of file plans and make sure that our municipalities have proper file plans that are approved by the provincial archives as well as adopted by council. We do records management inspections. Has an inspection been done at your municipality? We look at the disposal of records. What do you house? Do you have any A20s, A30s, or even going beyond that? We look at approved RCS systems, record control systems. Are your controls in place? We look at fully functional registries. Do you have a fully functional registry running? What are the gaps? Can you close the gaps? We look at training. Consistent training is very important. But even if we do have consistent training, we have to remember to go back to our registries and implement. It is important to implement what we have learned during our training sessions and workshops. Then we look at mandatory policies. Are your policies in place? Do you have email policies? Do you have records policies? Is your file plan intact? Have your additions and amendments been approved? So this is just a flow chart of the processes you follow in order to close those gaps. On slide number 8, I will cover the statutory duties of an accounting officer. In terms of section 13.5, the Archives and Record Services Act 43 of 1996, you have to appoint a designated official to be the records manager. Secondly, an accounting officer is the information officer in terms of section 1B of the PAIA Act. Section 62 of the MFMA Act states that an accounting officer must ensure that the municipality has those systems in place. Now, if you ask yourself, what are the benefits of a good records management system? You will see it on slide number 5. A record is something that represents proof of existence of a transaction, and that is used to recreate a proof of state of existence of a past event. An organization's records preserves its corporate memory. What are we without our corporate memory? Records management is the professional practice of managing records of an organization throughout its life cycle, from the time it is created to the time of its eventual disposal. It is primarily concerned with managing the evidence of an organization's activities, as well as the reduction and the mitigation of risks associated. Good record keeping supports effective business practice, and it improves accountability and efficiency. Records management is not only about holding an organization accountable. It is a direct benefit of the efficient conduct of its day-to-day business and underpins planning and development of policies. The ability to quickly trace documents and to extract them from files is important for information sharing, legal compliance, knowledge sharing, and General Administration. The next slide, slide 11, is of particular importance to me. We will delve deeper. We delve deeper in order to see what makes proper, well-running systems so beneficial. It improves processes. It improves the process of timelessly submitting evidence for audit purposes and for legislative requirements. It provides credible and reliable information for users to make informed decisions. Correct asset registers support information in the financial statements. It leads to a reduction of high audit fees as well. It improves audit outcomes due to no limitation of scope. On slide 12, management of records is the lifeblood of the audit process. Without it, the auditor may express a limitation of scope. Records management promotes transparency, accountability, and auditors may have unrestricted access to it. The internal audit process, records practitioner, and CFO should continually collaborate on the issues that relate to the status of records and advise their accounting officers accordingly. The accounting officer should provide latest feedback on the status of records reviewed by the AGSA, which is the Auditor General of South Africa. On the next slide, you will see we obtained this slide from the Auditor General themselves. This is a slide that reflects the audit outcomes of all 31 municipalities in the province. You will see some of them did very well, where others received disclaimers. And we realized that there's a direct connection and direct correlation between good record keeping and a good audit outcomes. For municipalities that received disclaimers, we realized that the registry function at those specific municipalities had deteriorated considerably, whereas the municipalities that did quite well, such as Hantam and a few others, had good systems in place. They could provide information to auditors at a point where it was needed. I want to take you through slide 15, slide 16, slides 17 and 18 before Mr. Thabo Legalamitwa takes over. On slide 15, you will see that records have been packed beautifully on shelves, and there is a sort of record system there. They made the most of what they had. On slide 15, you will see that this is a space underneath the town hall of a municipality. They took the initiative to protect their records, to make sure that the records were kept in a good state, looked after in a good quality state, you know, and they really did a very good job of just trying to bring order to their registry, although their resources were restricted. They made sure that the bottom of the town hall was sealed off, that there were no pests, no dust, no water leaks. They made sure that everything was filed appropriately and put in order. And this just needed a bit of manpower and it needed a good project manager. And this initiative was a success at this municipality. They realized that their municipality had housed very important historical information. They even had beautiful pictures and portraits of previous mayors, previous presidents, previous members of council, and it's very well looked after. And this municipality understands the importance of cultural heritage. Then we will go to Municipality C. We will go to Municipality C. This is a similar scenario, but a very, very different picture. This is on slide number 18. When we visited this municipality, they indicated to us that they also had their records stored under the town hall. And the first thing that we thought of was security. The town hall gets many functions, has many functions running, and the public moves in and out freely. So the security aspect was very questionable here. But when we opened it up, we were met with quite a deteriorated state. But we really believe as SALGA that where there's a will, there's a way, and the absence of effective records management breeds uncertainty. The uncertainty can breed chaos, and then we lose our most important records, our historical identity, slowly. I'm going to take you to slide number 22 to finish off at slide number 22. This is a beautiful picture of a system in place that's clean. Records are tidily kept and they are neat. And this is what we're looking for. And this is what we hope to move towards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon. Thanks, Justinia. I nearly said that she took the whole time, but it's fine. For context purposes, no, it's fine. I'll use that one. Or should I use this one? No problem. Thanks very much, Chair. My name is Thabole Khalamitwa. I am here with my team. The lady who was presenting, her name is Justinia Klute. She is our records officer. I have some of our team members from SALGA National. I think SALGA Gauteng is well here represented. The gentleman who will present after me is Mr. Rias Meyer. He is our ICT officer. So we are a team of 3 in the unit for FCS. FCS, we call it Finance and Corporate Services. I will just request maybe to go back and then just give a bit of context so that we are all on par. In the Northern Cape, we have, or countrywide, we have 257 municipalities. Of the 257 municipalities, the Northern Cape has 31. Of the 31, we have 5 districts. The first district where we are, which is the Kimberley area, is called the Francis Baard. And where the mining belt is held, which is your Kuruman area, it is called the JTG or John Taula Haitsewi district. And then you go up further to the Upington district or area, which is called ZF Mgau. district. Many years ago, it was the then Godonia district, pre-94, and then you go up to Namakwa, Springbok, that is your Namakwa, and then the last district, it is called Pixley-Gaseme. Now, Chair, ordinarily it is said that where there is no effective management of records, you have the slide that you have here, which breeds chaos or uncertainty. Now, ask yourself, if you are an archivist or you are a records manager or you are an auditor, you want to test, to do a test, or you want to audit, or to do completeness. Now, how do you then ascertain accuracy and completeness when you are going to ask for a document and you are taken to a storeroom and this is the type of document or storing system that you find? Perhaps maybe then just also to reflect that this perhaps might be much better. Slide, I think it's 20 or 21, 20. Is it following? Which one? This one. Oh, no, it's fine. I was on slide, sorry, can we go to slide 19? No, yeah, slide 19. I'm not sure, can you see it from your slide 19? I thought it's following from my side. Can you see it? It is a lot of chaos. Mr. Jabu, look at me. Can you see it? So that I can confirm. I'm not sure. But it is a slide that has a lot of chaos. I'm not sure if you can see it. That says absence of effective records management breeds chaos. Now you have a picture there. Thank you. You have a picture there that looks like a landfill site. I'm sorry to use that word, but some of our registries looks like a landfill site because we do not have systems in place, despite the fact that your SALGA, Treasury, COGSTA, Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, which is housing the provincial archivist, would want to put systems in place. And then when you go to the next slide, I think it's 20, you also see the situation there, it's a bit uncertain. And only slide 22, we say that ordinarily once you have these filing recs, it means that you are on your way to good practice. Now, the team would normally go out to municipalities to do what is referred to as municipal assessments. These assessments would be done in preparation for the Provincial Records and ICT Forum. One, the team developed a questionnaire assisted by the team from National. They developed a questionnaire in terms of record keeping, trying to understand what is it that can be done to assist municipalities. Number two, based on the responses received, a decision was then taken that they must go and do physical visits or inspection. And then this will then be followed up by saying what are the challenges in a municipality. An action plan is then developed, which is then communicated to the accounting officer. And then this becomes an ongoing tool that SALGA uses to assist municipalities. Justinia did make mention that SALGA developed a records management tool, which is also then in line with the EDRMS, Electronic Documents Records Management System, basically guiding municipalities to say, you want to move away from your traditional manual system to an electronic system. This is what you need to have in place. Obviously, once we have a workshop, we then unpack this, and then we are able to take you through all the technical modules, who are the project sponsors, who are the champions, and how best can we move forward. This is then a step-by-step guide that we normally use. And I would say this is an elementary one, because ordinarily it has a lot of details that we need to get into. You have to do the sourcing and configuration. The start of the project, you will conduct an environmental scan, your own environment as a municipality. Your needs will then be able to advise as to what is the next step. You will then determine functional requirements, and then that will be followed also by saying which system is best. We know there's been an argument to say we must had approval from SITA, State Information Technology Agency, because they are there to advise the public sector or service in terms of procurement of any ICT-related system. DSEC had their system that they were proposing. SITA had a system called Frisco. Other municipalities, because of National Treasury, was pushing that municipalities get onto M-Score. One of the modules there, I think there is provision made for records management. So there are those who are using some of these systems. As to whether they are working for them or not becomes a discussion for another day. And then the system needs to be configured. It then gets implemented. Users get trained, and then you embark on an M&E to say then how do you move forward. These are some of the challenges, and the list has not been exhausted. It is not exhaustive. Ordinary provinces, it might differ. But we have realized that, one, there may be capacity challenges in the Provincial Office of Sports, Arts and Culture, whereby they do not ordinarily do quarterly inspections. And we also understand that we are all on a budget. So if something that we can say, if municipalities can ensure that the inspections that are conducted by Sports, Arts and Culture, the recommendations that are done by the provincial archivist, if such can be implemented. Secondly, we've also realized that management ordinarily in municipalities, municipal manager, director, corporate services, CFO, or your Section 56 employees, or those who directly report to the accounting officer, ordinarily do not take records management serious. Officials working in records management in the Northern Cape, like I said, we have 31 municipalities. It was with shock and dismay to learn that of the 31 municipalities, you only have 5 adequately qualified records managers in the province. We had an engagement with UNISA under the leadership of Professor Mpongwepe, where we spoke about the program called BARM, Bachelor of Archives and Records Management. 2 was BIN. We engaged local government, SITA. Then we also realized that when we went through the route of RPL, for those who could not meet the minimum qualifications or minimum entrance fee for enrolling to be admitted for the BARM, BIN, or any other archival related course of UNISA, we did not get the enough numbers. Of the 31, I think we got less than 10. We approached Solplaiki, is the only university with data science. We know there's a difference between data and ICT. We spoke also about their ICT, National Higher Certificate for ICT, and then the postgraduate diploma in ICT, so that even those who are doing ICT can have an opportunity to study, be qualified, and then add value to the sector, or perhaps increase the pool. But that also did not give much. We've also realized that one of the challenges will be that lack of management buy-in. Ordinarily, when you are underperforming in one unit, and I'm saying this with due respect, in other municipalities, if you have a problem of not coming to work on Mondays or a day after salary, and they realize that they don't want to fire you, they send you straight to records management. So records is used as a dumping site. So records management or records unit, it's used as a dumping site, and that approach is not assisting. UNISA says, or advocates or qualified professionals, they are saying that archival studies or records management falls under the discipline of information science. Whether you go to any institution of higher learning, it is our wish to see records management professionalized. I think we can all hear the lamentation nationally that of the 257 municipalities, you only have 38 municipalities countrywide that are sitting on a clean bill of health. Ordinarily, we know in accounting, you don't get an unqualified. There's 4 types of reports you get. You get a disclaimer of opinion, you get a adverse, you get a qualified, you get unqualified. So you have a lot of municipalities, I think in the Northern Cape, there's about 10, if I'm not mistaken, which are financially unqualified yet with matters, meaning that there are certain housekeeping issues to be taken into consideration. We can't be excited. Now, when you look at that 38 municipalities, 21 of those come from Western Cape. then it means say 8 provinces share the 17 municipalities that are having clean audits. And you then have 3 provinces. The last time I checked the report from Ms. Malulek, our AGSA or our Auditor General of South Africa, you have provinces like Northwest, Free State, and I think Limpopo, Mpumalanga, but there are 3 provinces in the country where there is not even one clean audit. Now, if you are seated here, you are a records officer, the question that you need to ask yourself is that for us to change the narrative and improve the situation, can it be done? The team that I'm working with, we've been at SALGA for some time. There was a time when SALGA was swimming in records, was swimming in disclaimers. And that became an issue of the past. 2008, it was our first qualified, I think, but the report that you are supposed to get now from the AD, it will be the 11th in a row where SALGA is getting unqualified. And it started only with, or where SALGA is getting a clean bill of health, if I may say, from the AGSA. And this only started when we reformed our records management unit at SALGA. So it can be done, and this is what we are recommending, that municipal managers to make provision for the appointment of qualified, experienced records managers. This thing of recruiting comrades or people who are in theology and bringing them to records, it is not assisting. Number 2, the act is clear. Let us follow the prescripts to say if we want quality, value for money, let us appoint as per the NARSA. Number 3, records management system. Let us maintain the operation of document management classification system. Conduct your regular updates. You get a municipality where there's no backup and you ask yourself, should there, in case of any eventuality, whether fire or any other, the next day as if nothing has happened. Let us centralize this thing of finance, HR, mayor's office, having this. Let us have one central unit for record. When it is time for audit, it is much easier to ensure that the municipality is not qualified on what is referred to as limitation of scope. I'm about to finish, Mr. Nkatingi. Policy formulation, develop, implement, and review policies, keep up to date in terms of compliance, interact with the provincial archivists to standardize your records management. Still, can it be done? Yes. Identify targeted employees who need training, work closely with records. In the case of local municipalities, let us expedite the appointment of qualified records officers. Let us have training, schedule dates, and send invites to the trainees. Normally, DSEC will do this. Training to be conducted on the use of EDRMS and compliance, if any. Let us ensure that all municipalities and employees are aware of disaster recovery management processes. And then also let us engage with all other stakeholders. This question still stands, can it be done? And I think where you are seated, you are best placed to answer this question. And we do advocate an argument as SALGA that says, yes, it can be done, but it cannot be done by one person. It cannot be done by 2 people. We must all come, work together. I'm hoping for a day before I die. I don't know when will this happen, Program Director, that all 257 municipalities will get an unqualified audit report. Am I too optimistic? I don't know, but I believe that if we all work together, this can be done. Last slide, recommendations. Last slide in terms of recommendations. Management buy-in. This is what we are advocating for as SALGA. Sorry, second last slide. And then let's do away with common sense approach, whereby if I have studied like me at school, I majored with Setswana and biblical studies. You can't take me and put me into records. What am I going to do there? Take someone who understands records or who have studied archival sciences so that the person can take the unit from strength to strength. Also, we argue that for us to get returns on investment, let us appoint qualified personnel in terms of records and ICT. And we are also saying that finance, HR, ICT, and records management, they must work together, and we have a committee called Records Management Committee. And let us try also to centralize records management system. Let us also ensure that we have disaster recovery management plans in place. It is a good practice, but also an archival requirement that we have an offsite storage. Let us ensure that we have such in place. Let us do daily backups, continuous training and development for staff in records management and ICT. And then lastly, let us design our monitoring and what is the E again? M&E. Monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to assess actual performance against agreed objectives. And let us have our personal or professional development plans in place in terms of career pathing, so that even if you are like me, you've done Setswana and biblical studies, you can register with UNISA, study something, and then go up so that at the end, you can add value to your municipality. Last slide. Thank you so much. Dolibuha Stereke. Thank you so much. Mr. Nkatingi will correct me on that one. Thank you so much, colleagues. Should there be questions of clarity, we will be advised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can see, colleagues, that really Salga, they mean business. I'm a little bit jealous that they are dominating when it comes to our program. But on the other hand, it makes me happy that they are showcasing good practice from their institution. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You can come down. There will be time for questions and answers. Thank you. Let's move to the next presentation. Digitization of records by Salga once more. By Mr. Mayor. Over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know it says document management digitalization, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it up a bit, because before we can get to that aspect of being able to digitalize documentation, we actually need to reach a sphere where we are digitally mature with going forward and where we need to be. So I will go through the introduction, do a bit of a background context, look at the Salga digital areas and where it focuses. We will then also look at the support areas, the programs, the digital ICT maturity, the digital factory and data services. We then also look at understanding the municipality, its technical environment, the strengths and advantages, the challenges, and all the support requirements as required by municipalities. So with the digital technology and customized innovation identified the critical value creation and the center to respond to local government's problems, challenges, and the opportunities to digitalize records and to ensure that they're ready to move forward digitally. So we look at the 4 focus areas, which are the digital priorities. We look at the drive for digital maturity, where we look at the governance, the strategy, the compliance, and the people aspect. We then look at how we to deploy the digital solutions, where we look at the products, the systems, and the tools for reporting once everything is digitalized. We then look at data services and the platforms where we can do backups, recovery, and ensure that all documentation is always secure. We then look at the last and final aspect, which then talks to the broadband, because without good connectivity, we're never going to be able to digitalize anything within the environment. So when we get to the IT maturity assessments, we kind of score the municipality to see where the aspects are and where we need to move towards. We provide a fully comprehensive support intervention where we look at various aspects. So with the principle one, we look at the strategic mandate, and then we look at the capabilities at the municipality department to achieve the mandate in order of the objectives with the IDP or with the annual performance plan of the municipality or department. We then look at the corporate governance, which is the ICT must be institutionalized so that we can ascertain that there are policies, procedures, and all the correct committees are in place to actually start digitalization and move forward. Of the realization of the IT investments in will then accommodate our digital footprint and move forward. We look at how we're going to manage the risks when it comes to digitalization, because we're also going to be cognizant of the fact that there will always be a risk with regards to hacking, with regards to phishing, and with regards to ransomware attacks. We then make sure that all this is done in conjunction with the corporate governance framework of the municipality or the government department. Lastly, we then go and we look at the monitoring and evaluation. And we're always there to monitor, to see that it cross-cuts across all 6 principles, ensuring that all the performance enhancements and security is there. When we look at the management and the governance framework, when we sit down with the municipality and we look at the roadmap towards going to the governance, we look at the strategy and the governance, we look at the financial aspects and the financial management, we look at the people and the resources, we then do service and planning with the architecture of how it's going to look. We then also look at the infrastructure and how day-to-day operations will be in place at the municipality. We look at the security and the risks, because we all know that since 2 years ago when the country was in total lockdown, we needed to change the full sphere of how we were going to digitalize and how we're going to access information. And we look at the type of apps that is available, ensuring that there's security for all those apps. If we look at the IT governance maturity, so to assess the level of the ICT, to adhere to the governance principles, including we ensure that the right committees are in place, the right policies, that the structures from management down are there, and we then look at all the risk, and we look at the risk from all approaches to ensure that everything is covered. The ICT planning and the strategic, so we assess what the digital strategy is for the municipality and whether they are on the right footprint to actually move forward with a way forward to manage all the digital products, the way IT systems, the tracking strategy, the system implementations. We then also look at to determine the teams and which level the teams are at. Thus, my colleague earlier said, we have formed the alliances with the likes of LGCTA, Salt Lakey, and UNISA to actually look at how we can empower people going forward as well. With regards to the IT operations and the process maturity, we look at the day-to-day operations when it comes to records management, the scanning, how it will be indexed, how it will be placed, and where it will be placed. We then also look at the cybersecurity aspects, because in this province, I can tell you that in the last 6 months, we've had 8 municipalities that has been hit with ransomware with regards to records, and they are now in the process of actually trying to recover the data from their backups, which was done by an external service provider. So the assessment, we then look at the following artifacts, which is the policies, the procedures, the processes, the governance structures with regards to, is there a proper IT steering committee? Is there a proper records office steering committee that actually looks at the problems and the aspects of the records office? We then also look at the strategy documents, the master plans, the methodologies, and all the reports associated with that. Those areas above are also the areas that is concentrated on by the Auditor General when it comes to the audits on a yearly basis. We then also look at the issues of the cybersecurity, and as I mentioned earlier, it's going to become an increasing focus area because of the ransomware attacks that's currently been taking place within South Africa. If we look at the digital product maturity, So the extent to which all the process at the municipality is automated and supported through digital systems, products, tools, and solutions. The data management maturity, the extent to which the municipal reporting and decision-making processes are supported by automated data management platforms, tools, alongside with all analytics, dashboards, and third-party systems, ensuring that all of them integrate into the current systems at municipalities. So when we start the process, we then sit down and we have a digital road mapping session where we assist municipalities to develop a digital strategy. We look at what technologies they're adopting, and also then looking at what their way forward is, ensuring that it would cover all aspects of the municipality and that it's financially feasible for the municipality. So when we build the digital future, we look at the connected infrastructure so that once the connected infrastructure is there, we're looking at going and building a smart city. We look at the connecting of citizens, because to ensure that citizens can access everything that is at the municipality from a virtual interface. We look at the connected workforce. So it's using the technology, recruitment productivity, the mobility, and ensuring that ongoing training happens. We're looking at the smarter homes concept as well, where you can actually offer better services and things can actually be done remotely for your home. We look at the paperless administration. So it's enhancing adopting the new tools, simplicity, traceability, and transparency with everything that happens with regards to other statements from municipalities. We look at the smart embedding technology in every single service, from waste collection, community safety, revenue enhancing, and ensuring that we can create digital services which are then smart cities. We look at hyper-automation. It's new technologies such as robotics, automated high-volume repeatable tasks, useful and compliance for governance. The integrated process is the technology as a means to eliminate waste, duplication, redundancies, and to accelerate all processes outputs. Data-driven in local government. So we're using the analytics to empower all reporting, decision-making, and ensuring that all the proper planning, catering, and data sharing across the sector can be achieved. So data as a service is just, like I said earlier, it's using the analytics to empower municipalities with the right intelligence for decision-making and planning, ensuring that it cuts across all sector, from waste management to potholes, to everything. So basically with that particular pothole system is if you take a photo of a pothole in a particular street, it then uploads the coordinates, sends the location, and the municipality will know exactly where the pothole is. So the last one is broadband, because without good connectivity, we will never be able to achieve digitalization. We know that in our province, the Pixley Kaseme district was chosen by national government as the broadband area to get, I think it's 238 sites that's going to be receiving broadband from education all the way through to government sector, just in Pixley Kaseme. With numerous and rigorous discussions, I can proudly say that we've now chosen Salt Plaatje as another pilot site to actually create a digital city in the Northern Cape. So with the broadband, we've developed the PPP framework. So it's a private to public enterprise assistance to actually build forward and going forward with spectrum, the financing around it, the internet, and then the funding around. So there will be ongoing workshops conducted for councillors, officials, on the broadband and the business aspects and opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before we proceed, remain seated, advocate. Before we proceed, we have we had a presentation on literary translation, Petsolelo literary translation as a form of repatriation and recovery. and the lessons thereof. Unfortunately, the two presenters have a hectic schedule and are supposed to leave, but I requested them that before they leave, let me give you an opportunity to at least have some questions or comments limited to only two because of time, only to them because they have to leave now. Over to you. I know you were noting when each and every presenter was presenting. Can we engage with them? Can I see hands? Petzolelo, literary translation as a form of repatriation. One hand noted, another one, only three. One, going, bye-bye.
Oh, thank you very much, Program Director. I want to appreciate the presenters before I can maybe clarify or put my question forward. The presentations were very exciting and impressive to me. So I have learned throughout their presentations that they are extensively skilled and experienced. And they spoke about shortage of authors, most especially authors focusing on the local language. I just want to check if there is any plan or project in place that maybe you already thought of to train or to, what can I say, to make awareness and ensure that you maybe develop skills within mostly so that we can have such kind of people as we go forth with life. We don't stuck in the same place and cry about the same problem forever. I think and believe you can do it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Talk to your audience before you leave.
Thank you. We, as a university, as I said in my preface, one of the strategic areas of interest and so-called niche areas that as a university we are mandated to look at is the broad area of heritage, but with specific attention to African languages. So from an academic programming point of view, we have started programs that have got some focus on African languages. Sabata here coordinates a creative writing major in our undergraduate program. And the thrust there is definitely creative writing in local or African languages. Our collaboration with DSAC also included sort of your informal engagements with writers from across the province. And the thrust was always to try and engender the use of local languages. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. The other thing is that because we're a new university, we keep on introducing new programs continuously. And so next year we'll be having our first graduates in the BA majoring with creative writing. So basically we are midwifing a generation of African writers, and we do encourage them to, if not to write in African languages, but to domesticate English in such a way that their English reflects where they are coming from, the communities where they are living. And as we go on, we'll also be able to focus on literary translation as a formal program as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we put our hands together? But before that, I strongly believe that although they came here for a particular presentation, but they have heard about the issue of records management and archiving. I take it that you are ambassadors of your university. You will take the message to the university that sooner, not later, do something. Thank you so much. Let's put our hands together. Oh, wait, excuse me. Prof is bending here. Prof is bending. I'm sorry. It just came. It needs to be addressed.
I'm sorry for coming back again, but I thought maybe you'll speak to something which relate to reaching out than focusing on your own local students within the university. Like more especially targeting the previously marginalized areas, especially the rural areas, including those who are not even thinking about going to the university, so that maybe you can motivate them to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I think maybe we kind of summarized our responses a little bit. If we had the time to give a little bit more detail to the activities, at least I'll refer to what we did already with DSAC. The programming we did with workshops, creative writing workshops in the summer school that we held every year was actually targeted. In fact, we invited, if you were a student, you were not eligible for that. It was mainly targeted at communities, but we would also travel to go to almost all the districts and hold some of those workshops. Was that fruitful? We hope so. Can it be developed and fleshed out later? And see Penyo has left. This is a question that we've asked ourselves and said, we perhaps need to flesh out this community outreach aspect and then work. We've got, and I'm sorry to brag, Prof, I think the university has got the most sophisticated working spaces in the country at the moment. We compete with no one in terms of resources and working spaces and what we can offer to people. So we open it up for these kinds of engagements. And our hope is that we can get back to the table and reprogram some of these activities. Yes. And if I could go to what you already said, I was going to have a chat with him before I leave, because that's an area we've been thinking about, we're looking at, and there's quite a number of possibilities in terms of the levels of intervention, in terms of training that we could offer. Again, I'll break. If you haven't been to Soplak University, please take a tour. I guarantee you'll send your child here next year.
Thank you so much. It is very interesting because there was one gap which I was worried about to say. We are having academic institutions, we are having researchers, but when it comes to collaboration with the implementers, is neither here or not. So based on the way you are addressing issues, I can see where South Africa one day will be there on the map. Thank you so much. Thank you. Colleagues, now we are moving to the last presenter on archives and related legislative framework. It's so exciting because it will come from a legal guru who is the advocate Dennis Make from National Archives. Over to you.
Marudin said they must clap for me.
You made a mistake, but it's fine. I never said clap. I'm the chairperson.
Now I can't see the time. Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know I'm standing between you and your lunch. So what I'll do is that I'm not going to read the presentation. that I prepared for you. It's about plus minus 30 slides. So you'll read those over your ledger. I wrote those 30 something slides so that I can intimidate the organizers to put me in the program. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I will talk just 2 lines on the introduction, then go to legislative mandate. I will fix that. You know, I was very tired last night when I was finalizing the presentation. I can see this big spelling mistake there. Then I'll go to the objects and functions of NASA also briefly, then deal with the duties of the NAAC, then challenges of the Act, proposed amendments we are envisaging, then go to POPIA, then go to PAIA. Under POPIA and PAIA, the issues I want to tackle are with regards to penalties that you may experience. You saw during the presentation of Ms. Klute that there was a little bit, and Mr. Thabo, there were lots of chaos in those records that were filed there. So there is a big stick which the 2 legislation bring forward. Under the copyright, I will tie into what Professor Landman said, but bring to you a very interesting case which was brought by Blind SA to the courts, and they won the case. So the legislation will be changed, taking into consideration of section 19 big D. Then deal with other related legislation and conclusion. Okay. In terms of the introduction, the NASA has its records from 1829. The majority of those records are public and non-public. You may ask yourself, what are public records and non-public records? And the answer is simple. In a municipality, for example, all those minutes in the provincial government, the Hansard, etc., those and all the other records falls under public records. Then under non-public records, you'll have all those tapes and recordings that the council normally uses to record the proceedings in council meetings. And then other non-public records will be films, oral histories of Professor Landman are also covered there. Then under section 13, the National Archivist is empowered to drive the National Archives with the assistance of the NAC. And the duty of the NAC is to advise the Minister and the Director General, and to also work with SARA and other bodies like the Public Protector, and they submit annual reports. I want to go back to legislative legislation and the mandate. We derive our mandate from the Constitution, the National Archives Act, the Legal Deposit Act, Copyright Act, Public Finance in local government. It will be the Municipal Finance Act. Then PAIA, PAJA, ECT. Then we have protection of personal information. Then we have the white paper. Then we have the MIS. You all know the object of the National Archives, but I want to flag a 3H, which talks about why we are here. We are here for the awareness campaign, but then those others are the duties of the National Archives. Then I've touched on this. Okay, the National Archives Act was amended in 2001, and it was never costed. The mandate of digitization was not included. Oh, and the new Knowledge and Information Management Act came thereafter, and they are impacting on the National Archives Act. The National Archives has case files of ex-political leaders, death registers, divorce notices, etc. Then the National Archives Act does not make provision for third parties, so we will amend that in the new legislation. Then proposed amendment that these stakeholders that are here, you'll have to assist us in bringing proposals on what needs to be amended. We need to amend technology. We need to deal with cosmetic changes, align the NASA Act with the white paper. The National Archivist will need to be an ex-official member of the NAC. Then we need to deal with the issue of people with disabilities. And Dr. Mudiba talked to us about the 5IR. We need to also address that, and we need to form partnerships with the colleagues, those who just left us now. The current status is that we are appointing a service provider who will look at the amendments. We got 12 bids. The bid committee looked at those in May. The winning bidder will soon start its duty. There will be public consultations in all the 9 provinces, and the work will need to be finalized in 6 months. I will move to POPIA. To say POPIA came into being on 1 July 2022. And it regulates personal information that may be processed. It establishes conditions, and then it provides rights and remedies, and establishes a voluntary and a compulsory measure. On public institutions are exempted from complying with the Act. However, you need to follow those 8 conditions. These 8 conditions are as follows. We need to be accountable. We need to follow process limitations. We need to be dealing with people specifics. Issues of further processing limitations are there. With further processing, what is happening is that an applicant can apply for a job, don't get the job, you don't have to keep his or her application there with you for a longer time than prescribed. Then the information quality in all records need to be ascertained, like Ms. Klute indicated. Then we have to use an openness system, and we need to put together security safeguards. With security safeguards, we know that people hack our systems from time to time. So we need to ensure that we keep security IT hackers at bay. Then data subjects must participate in all the process that we are engaging in. Those are the 8 conditions that are important. Then how do you go about ensuring that you comply? You need to perform a data mapping exercise, do audits, compile an inventory of personal information held by your organization, designate specific people who will process personal information. You need to know where and how that information is stored. You must ensure the safeguards I spoke about earlier. Then the audits I spoke about already. Then, yes, safeguards are very important, but then you also need to have training from time to time so that the people that are dealing with such information are well equipped. Then in terms of compliance, you need to put together the governing structure in any of the organizations where you are. That was touched on earlier. We must have policies on retention periods, destruction of records, etc. Because if you don't have these policies, manuals, etc., you'll see that there are penalties that will befall you. Then I've spoken about training that is very important for all of your employees. Then the responsible party needs to appoint information officers and deputy information officers, and those need to be registered with the regulator. Okay, then the regulator has put together a few guidelines or code of conducts for us in the archives and information sector. We need to have a workshop where we are going to put together this code of conduct. Currently, we don't have one, but then at a later stage, we'll inform you as to when we can have such a session for us to draft this code of conduct. Then there is a guide on information officers and their deputies and several others. Okay. Okay, then the information officer and the deputy information officers that I spoke about earlier, this will be their duties. They need to encourage compliance. They need to work with the regulator on investigations. They need to put together a compliance framework. Then ensure that they perform a personal information impact assessment, and a manual is developed. So I'm not sure as to how many municipalities or provincial governments or lab archives or any other private or public body have started developing these manuals. As indicated earlier, there are penalties if you don't comply, especially with section 100 to 106. There will be those penalties of 10 years or both a fine and imprisonment. You know that the maximum amount for contravening POPIA is a number of million rands, which we all don't have. So we need to work with the guidelines that the information regulator has put together so that we comply and we submit reports regularly. Then the contravention of any other section attracts a lighter sentence, which is 12 months or both the 12 months and a period of incarceration. Then reporting is important that if there's any other infringements, the regulator needs to be informed as such so that the infringement by any responsible party can be investigated. Okay, then you will know that whenever a charge is made, it has to comply with a number of things. Here, it will be the name and the address of the infringer, particulars of the alleged offense, the fee that needs to be paid for that infringement. The amount does exceed 10 million. We know that our organizations don't have such money, so we need to ensure that we don't fall foul of any of the conditions laid by the regulator. Then in terms of PAIA, It's as according to section 32(2) of the Constitution, and then a new legislation was put together, which is legislation 2 of 2000, which indicates that any person, it enables that any person can request information held by the state in upholding constitutional values of transparency, openness, participation, and accountability. And then the main objectives of PAIA are to give that constitutional right of section 32(2). Then PAIA establishes voluntary and mandatory mechanisms. Then in terms of application of PAIA, PAIA does not apply to a record of a public or a private body if that record is requested for purposes of criminal or civil proceedings, meaning that if you have been offended by the hospital, maybe. I had one example yesterday from some other colleague. You can do PAIA so that when you get the results, you can go and sue. But instead you can use PAJA, which is administrative justice. Then also you can't be using, okay, I've already indicated that for criminal cases or civil proceedings, that record cannot be requested for that. But then PAIA does not apply to a record of cabinet and its committees. Maybe on this one, we will need a legal opinion to check as to, does this also mean the municipality or the provincial, but if it's cabinet, then it will mean the provincial legislature. Then it does not also apply to special tribunals like this famous one, the SIU, which is now investigating for the. Then the penalties, and these ones are tied to that presentation of Ms. Tlute. If an information officer or a head of a private body does not comply with an infringement notice served by the regulator, meaning the information regulator, the penalty will be a fine or imprisonment for not more than 3 years or both. Then, if you deny anyone access to a record by destroying, damaging, or altering that document, as a civil servant, municipal worker, a records officer, then there is a fine or imprisonment of not more than 2 years. Then if you intentionally deny a right of access to a record by concealing it, when a person has made an application, then you know that whatever is contained in the record may make your case weak as an institution or a private body. Then you hide that document. You'll be, in terms of penalty, get a fine or imprisonment of not more than 2 years. If you intentionally deny a right of access to a record by falsifying it, meaning that by altering what is in that record is also a fine or imprisonment of not more than 2 years. Then a failure by the information officer willingly or negligently not to develop a PAIA manual and willingly and negligently also not make it available, it's also a fine or imprisonment for not more than 2 years. An information officer who willingly or grossly negligent manner charges a fee other than those that are stipulated in Regulation 16, it is also a fine or imprisonment of no more than 2 years. This is the last but one slide. It's on copyright, as indicated earlier, that in terms of the Copyright Amendment Bill of 2017, there is this one section which is important in the current, which was read in the current Copyright Act, which is 19D. That section now allows that copies are to be made, or copies must be adapted for personal use and for import and export of accessible, making those to the virtually and those who can hear. And the above is applicable for free, meaning that if you are in archives or you are a library or you are an art gallery and a person rocks at your door to ask for a copy of any record that you are holding, you must make that record freely available. You must go produce it in any other way that will enable the person to get access to such a record for free. That is the new amendment which Parliament has been given a period of time to go and rectify. This was a victory for Blind SA and a number of institutions that are fighting for rights of those who are disabled. Other legislation, we have PAJA. It is the Administrative Justice Act. This one says that, for example, if I apply for a job and you don't give me that job, you must give me reasons why you made that decision. If I come and request for a document and you don't give me that document, you deny me access to that document or record or collection, you must give me written reasons. If not, then those things that I've read under PAIA will apply, that you concealed it, etc., in a period of 2 years, or a fine will be imposed. Okay, so it applies to any administrative action that is undertaken. For example, if I apply to be nominated as a council member, Mr. Chairperson, and I don't make it into the National Archives Advisory Council, I must get a reason, a written reason. If I don't agree with that reason, then I go further. Then the Electronic Communication and Transaction Act of 2002, that's the one that deals with signatures. If you send me an SMS and you write below that after that you have written Jabu Kating, that SMS is a valid document which I can produce when required. Or if on Facebook you write there that I don't like Dennis Maake, then you put your name next to what you have written, then Zosha. It's the same. It's the same as when on Monday I ask you to come to work and you write, no, Pushmake, I'm not coming to work. Then you parapher there at the below Jabuka Ding. then I accept that it's a valid document as per this act that you have resigned. Then there is the Legal Deposit Act. The Legal Deposit Act establishes the national bibliography of a country, meaning that, what happened now? Meaning that in terms of the Legal Deposit Act, everything that is published in South Africa needs to be recorded for statistical purposes, or that to appear at UNESCO or the Library of Congress in America, that this is for people like Prof who are scholars, so that they don't have problems in doing referencing, etc., etc. Then we have the minimum information security standards. That one deals about issues of security, secrecy and confidentiality. You know that if you work for a municipality and you divulge information held by that municipality unlawfully to third parties, then the municipality has a right of taking you on. It applies even for any other level or sphere of government or companies too. It applies that if you share company secrecy with third parties, then it is a problem. Then there is this one that was called, or used to be called, the official name is Protection of State Information Act or Bill. This one deals with the protection of sensitive state information, and then it indicates that systems need to be put in place for classification and declassification of such information. If you have disclosed some of this information unlawfully, that charge called treason may befall you, and you'll be in big problems. In conclusion, Chairperson, NASA has set aside 2 million to amend the Act and other legislation that we are using, such as the Legal Deposit Act and the NCLES Act. That work of the amendment will take about 6 months. Mr. Katingi was asking, Mahalifa was asking me as to how long, and then someone also asked during the week as to how long is the issue of the legislation for archives going to be concluded. So the answer is that immediately on the appointment of the service provider, within 6 months, or 6 months is the maximum period for which this work needs to be concluded. Then we will request you as South Africans and those abroad, all stakeholders that we work with, to make comments, send us possible amendments, so that those can be taken into consideration. For records managers specifically, they always ask us that the National Archives Act is vague when it comes to the appointment of records managers, as to at which level they will need to be appointed. So the answer to that is that when you feel that the level where records managers are at currently, you can make a submission. Our service providers, together with us, will indicate as to how many page submission you can make, whereby you are proposing that this appointment of records managers, as Mr. Klute indicated, that it is found in the Municipal Finance Management Act, also in the NASA regulations is there. You need to make a substantive submission, which will convince everyone that these colleagues want the level to be at this bracket, maybe in terms of finances, etc., or in management hierarchy. But all other amendments that you'll be making will be going to halls like this in the country to hear your views and hear you out and work in all that you have requested us to look at, and ultimately, if all legalese in your submissions are met, then we'll go that route. Thank you very much. Ka leboga.
Thank you, Advocate. We are getting there. It's historic what happened today here. For the first time, I've seen a program director who managed to run the program based on how it has been written. If you look now, it's 2 o'clock, and when you look at our program, it's time for questions and answers. So, but before we move to any other level, I had 9 presenters. 2 of them already are gone, and we have appreciated the good job that they have done. Now we are left with 7. This is how we are going to put our hands together to show appreciation to the good job that they have done. We'll say 1 for the first one. There are 7. Let's start. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now it's time for questions and answers. Let's start with Prof. Landman. Can I see hands, please? Oh, what's going on here? Oh, all right. Technology. You are getting there. Okay, it's fine. Let me be pointing hands the time being. I want to take hands first. I have 1 already, 2, and then 3. I'll start with you, and then the second one, and the third one. Let me start with these 3, then I'll go for another round. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Johan Pieterse. The question to Prof. Landman. I'm also a records management professional, and one of the characteristics of a few of them is authenticity, reliability. It must be a true reflection of what was said or done. So how do you say that oral history is a true reflection? Because we know anyone, if you have 10 people in a room and you start the story from the beginning, the last person's story is totally different from the first one. So that's my question. Thanks.
Let me check with Prof. Would you like to take the 3 and you respond once? Thank you. That is the first one. Let's move for the second one and the third one, then she'll respond.
Thank you very much. Mr. Javier at Provincial Archives. Mine is just a comment. On behalf of the MEC for Sport, Arts and Culture in the Northern Cape, Mayor Desiree Finis, as well as the HOD, Mr. Piri, we would like to express our gratitude and appreciation to Prof. Landman for blessing us with her presence and providing us with a much more insightful, interesting and worthwhile presentation on oral archiving. In addition to that, we would also like to extend our appreciation to Professor Segote, that is the president for OHASA, the Oral History Association of South Africa, for encouraging us to transform the archives and records management sector in the Northern Cape. Thank you very much.
Greetings to the floor. My name is Bulelwa Caroline Short. I'm a student at Sol Plaatje University. I'm doing my third year, final year in history, public history. So it deals a lot with oral history. It is known that oral history is recording, preservation, and conservation of a person's experience and opinions. And oral history consists of 3 processes, of which are pre-interview, interview, and post-interview. So the post-interview part is where the archive comes in, and it only comes in when the interviewee or the narrator has signed off their rights and gives permission for the archive to have access to his or her recording. So if the narrator or interviewee doesn't sign off his or her rights to the archive having access to his recording or her recording, so what happens? Does the archive strive for the recording or not? Since the interviewee doesn't want the archive, the repository, to have access to his recording and doesn't want it to be given to the public or institutions that want the information. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. It appears that people have been listening. That's my great fear. What you ask is, how can you deal with an audiovisual record as a record? And I can, okay. Sorry, I may not look at you. I can answer that quite quickly by, if you want to, you can see some of the articles I wrote on the internet. So when I write an article based on oral sources, on interviews, I immediately and introductory say, I'm going to give these voices through unmediatedly, without mediating them through interpretation. Because I believe the moment you interpret a source, interpretation is colonialization. You colonize a source when you interpret it. So at the very beginning, I said, I have all these interviews. I'm not going to interpret them and try to say what are the agendas, the political and cultural and gender and race agendas behind these interviews. I'm going only to thematize them, to put them under themes. So if I interviewed 10 people, and on this topic, and from this 10 interviews, the following themes emerge. And I let the people, yes, I see you are horrified, madam, but that is how I do it. Without mediating the source, I give the source through under themes. That's what I do. So, okay. As I say, if you want to, you can see on Google Scholar or so how I do it, but that's why objectivist historians, they don't trust oral sources. They say, you know, what I do is I also invite other sources, written sources and so on, but I will not say, you know, Sipho said that, but Sipho is an asshole. You know, don't take note of him. I'll just say Sipho said that, you know. I won't mediate and evaluate him. So that's how I do it. The second question is Sigurd was a remark. Thank you, Mr. Geweer. You are really a gentleman, and I will quote you unmediatedly. Okay. And the third question is the question on, you know, the problem we have been discussing here is that the NARSA Act doesn't really deal adequately with oral audiovisual sources. So then you interview somebody, you must first get that institution's consent, then the person's consent, then after before you publish, you must get that person's consent. And now you have now published, now you put that source, that record in the archives. And you're asking, so now that person can say, I want an embargo on that. It may not go out, but it's against what's happening in the world. At the moment, all sources should be accessible. And we just don't have the legal insight. What happens to these sources? If a person say, I'm going to give this source to the archives, but nobody may access it. I don't think legislation has already dealt with that. Because then why do you put it there? Why don't you just put it there, push it in there where the sun doesn't shine? So why do you put it in the archives, just for safe holding? Then you can rent a safe holding box there at the post office or at the bank or something. But the idea is, as I see it, worldwide, the tendency is that all sources in the archives need to be accessible. There may be an embargo on them, but that in South Africa legislation, and I hope the NARCS Act will deal with it, but legislation doesn't seem to be adequate at the moment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prof. Colleagues, can we be short and straightforward with our questions? I'm worried you have been sitting for a long time, and she's the first one, we still have 6. I'm opening for the last time for only 3 whose hands were up. Can I identify those hands which I've stopped them? No. Just to say something, we have our virtual colleagues. So that is the reason why I'm limiting the number of questions. Otherwise, we'll be here for a long time. Let me have those 3 hands. 1, 2, 3. Before I get the virtual ones, I'm closed now inside. I'll get to the virtual. Thank you. Yeah, just to clarify, Prof. Yes, still for you. No, unfortunately, Prof, your presentation was so exciting that people want to know something. Let me give the 3 opportunity. You start, Prof, and then the chair, and then who's the 3rd one? Oh, there are only 2. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I want to first appreciate the presentation. It was very interesting as well, like many others. But throughout the talk, I identified that we still have a very huge gap in our archival heritage. And I just want to check with Prof whether they, as a historian or oral historian, they do have a plan in place, or they just have specific target areas, and whether they have a plan to identify these gaps and also list them so that other fellow oral historians can also target the same area, because I think they can be in the best position to coordinate the whole thing. Like yesterday, there was a presentation about listing international archival records. I think even this one can qualify. Maybe we can have the national list of target gaps that can be covered with oral history. I hope I was short. Thank you.
Ampere, Prof. Ampere. Please, when you ask questions, stand up and look at me. It's for recording purpose.
Thank you, Program Director. You didn't make the prof stand up. You are very unfair. This is sexism.
Sorry, Chair. It's unfortunate on his side because, yeah, you can continue.
Okay. No, thank you, Prof, for the presentation. I was very excited because oral history, I'm really passionate about oral history. I think it will take us very far in terms of covering our historical gaps. And I'm also happy that it got the blessings of Cabinet. But I'm getting a sense, a Prof talked about gaps, and I think his gaps are thematic. My gaps are legislative around the very same subject of oral history. Do we have a policy that will clarify certain issues? For me, I don't think it is fair that the interviewees are not remunerated, especially if the interview is commissioned by an institution. We tried to do that and we succeeded, but I was not happy with the amounts. We did it in KZN. Would identify a theme, identify possible interviewees, and we'll talk about them, about the fee structure. And I think that has to be filtered into the policy. Because when you write a book, you get remunerated if you are authoring, because it's your idea, it's your information. But with the interviewees, it's their information, it's their experience, but they don't get anything. I think we need to have policy around that. And then on the issue of transcribers as well, I think if we want to take oral history seriously, we need to have specified rooms where they can actually listen to the recordings and transcribe properly and have a very professional setup. I'm glad you are having an OHASA conference coming up because there's a lot more that can be unpacked there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Before you respond, Prof, the questions were only two. Let me have two from abroad. Wait a bit. Can I have, is it only one? Thank you. Can I have that virtual question,
Okay,
please?
there's a question here from Paul Rachel Mukobodi. She says, how do oral history interviews expand what we know about historical events? How do oral history interviews expand what we know about historical events? Thank you.
I'll be quick. Such exciting questions. Professor there, you know, all I can say is the idea of coordinating oral history projects is an excellent idea. And I was hoping that there would be somebody to drive that effort. But at the moment, we just see, you know, you meet an interesting person, you accidentally interview that person. We don't have really coordinated programs in the whole country. It's an excellent idea. I hope somebody will be in a position to drive that. The second thing, Madam, thank you. Those are very valuable remarks. I'm going to comment just on one. I'm also confused about paying for interviewees because, you know, I will get money to go and interview somebody, but that person gets nothing. So what I did when, for instance, on the farm workers in Hoedspruit, I interviewed hundreds of them on the religious discourses that make them vulnerable to HIV infection. And then I paid them 20 rand each. And they would actually sit with babies in long lines just for that 20 rand. Oh, I was scolded for that by other people. Never to do that ever again, because I make it impossible for other people to do interviews. Also, that's the one, paying poor people. What we do, and what at some stage at UNISA, we had a situation where they will give us gifts or groceries or something, and then we will give that to the people. That is now where poor people is concerned. When you want to interview a high-profile person, that becomes even more complicated. The other day, you know, they renamed this Libertas, the guest house of the president, to Sefako Mogadu. And I was there, and you know, he started a church, and his daughter or granddaughter, who was still a priest in that church. And I went forward to ask her, can I, because she made such an impression on me, I wanted to interview her. And the next moment, a whole lot of people were around her, and they are all protecting her story, you see. And then they say, if I want to interview her, I must pay X amount, which was impossible, you know. So it was just impossible for me to do that interview. It was just too expensive. So these are all the things, yes, that can be regulated through a policy, I suppose. it's difficult. But thanks for raising that. That's an issue I should have mentioned, actually. Then what does oral history contribute to history? That is exactly, I think, the point we have been talking about today, is that there are extreme gaps in the recording of our history, and that much of the written history is by missionaries or other white people, and that the only way in which we can fill those gaps are by oral interviews. And then, of course, as we have said, it's always a problem on the truthfulness. I don't think truthfulness is actually important. I think that person expresses his or her views and experiences, and that you respectfully deal with that. Even if you know it may not be true, you know. Yeah, that is oral history, can fill those gaps, and they have filled. I can make examples, but not the time for that now. Now I'm finished. Huh?
Thank you, Prof. Thank you. Really, you are finished. We are moving to the next presentation, which is World War exhibition by Prof. Mans and Dr. Sampson. Are they there? Thank you. Can we have questions, comments? Noted. One. Going, gone. Thank you. Chair.
Thank you, Program Director. It's not my intention to monopolize the floor, but as someone from KZN, I thought I need to make a few observations. One, there is nothing like the Museum of KwaZulu-Natal. All of them have names. One in Maritzburg is Umsunduzi Museum. So for purposes of reference, I suppose they have to be specific about the names. And there is nothing like the Library of South Africa. It's the National Library of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those are the comments. Unfortunately or fortunately, on your side, we don't have further questions. And I hope you have noted the comments. You don't have to respond to that. Unless otherwise you want to say something, Prof. Manzi and Dr. Sampson. But to me, there were comments. Thank you. Gone. There we are. Now we are moving to these ones. We are done. They are gone. And then we are moving to the presentation, records management standards across the province of local government level. Ms. Klut and Mr. Lihalametwa, let's engage with them. No, you don't have to come. Remain seated there. You might be lucky. You might find there is not even a question for you or comment. Can I have that, please? Question or comment? One, you are not lucky. One is here. Another one. Two. Records management. Come on. Three. Yes. Let's start by three.
Yeah, thanks again, Program Director. Yeah, the two presentations were very good as well. Like I said, all the presentations were very nice to me. Oh, I must go up. I thought I'll be higher than the camera. All right. Yeah, actually, this one is just a comment. It's not like a question. Because I heard from the presentation from Mr. Lekalamitwa, he was talking about being struggling to get the training for the staff. But when I shake my brain, I can recall that at UNISA we have almost everything, including the RPL for those who does not have metric. But if you have metric, we can start you with the higher certificate. You qualify with the metric year. And then we also have a program for those who are in the wrong field or who find themselves in the wrong field. Maybe you are accountant, you have an accounting degree, but you feel you want to be this side. We have a program for archive and records management so that we don't start you with many years from the beginning. You only complete this one with 1 year, within 1 year. You can come closer to me so that I don't read the whole thing because of time. We will talk on the background. There are many more others, including the honors, the masters and PhD. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, presenter, for your presentation. Mine is also just a comment. The manager of records at Khotso Flatela, Mr. Unati, made a comment 2 days ago to say that people have an attitude towards records management. That is why most of the units or registries are not functional. And the one other thing that you actually alluded to is that registries are rather clinics or rehabilitation centers, of which is a problem. And now even people who are responsible for records at various institutions or departments, they don't know the importance of records management. So my appeal would be that Salga, wherever you go, please emphasize that whenever there's vacancies for records managers, they need to get suitably qualified individuals in those positions so that all these records departments or registries must be fully functional. Thank you.
Thank you. Johan Peters again. I just want to say I work for CETA, so I implement records management systems as well as the archival system for the national and the provincial archives. So I'm a records manager and the archivist. And I've done the program that the professor talked about because I was in IT or I'm in IT and I'm currently doing my PhD. So it works. The question is, or the first comment is I'm concerned, very concerned. Everyone shows nice pictures of how the paper looks in the archives. Electronic records are worse off than those papers. People don't manage paper, so that's the question to the Salga people. How well do you manage your electronic records? Is that in place? Because when we were at one archive, they said, we don't care about electronic records, we don't even manage them. And today, more electronic records are being created than paper records. So are we not neglecting a bigger part of what we should manage than what we really should do? Thanks.
Yeah. I thought, Salga, you are lucky, but unfortunately you had comments. Please don't say anything on comments. The only question that I had is the one that talks about electronic records management, because as far as paper is concerned, we have seen how organized you are. So now tell us about electronic records management.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps just to register a concern that we've been presenting since this morning without lunch, but hopefully that will be taken care of. There were 3 questions. You were right, Chair, that the other 2 are comments. I will then stick to the comment or the question posed by Mr. Johan Pieterse. If I have to speak for Salga, we have been using a system called Paper Trail in terms of EDRMS or Electronic Document Records Management System. Currently, we are out on tender to get the best system as an organization. Salga, it's a public entity. Our national office is based in Pretoria with 9 footprints. However, for municipalities, it's a bit of a sad story, if one may say, because we've tried as a province to say of the 257, we then firstly, many years ago, we tried to collaborate with HSRC. There was an institute called Meraka Institute under HSRC, Human Science Research Council, where Salga was saying, let us have one homogeneous system for all 257. But we are also aware that there were those who were not for the system, of which we do not understand, because when it comes to national and provincial government, they are all on basic accounting system and PERSAL, if I'm not mistaken. we're saying if for all municipalities, or perhaps we can bring it to province. National Treasury came with M-Score. I would not want to shoot it down, but from inception of M-Score up until now, you don't have all other municipalities using M-Score. In the province, you have others under Inzalo. If I'm not mistaken, you have others who are using Sebata. You have others who are under IMIS. So it is still an uncoordinated effort. But we as an organization, we have an own system we are using. In terms of electronic records or document, as you are saying, we are advocating for municipalities to say, perhaps let us take one district where we will recommend for a shared service. If it is working, is then done, we can speak to CETA and also to DSEC in the province and say, can we roll it out to the entire province? But we are also understanding that there are some certain limitations. One of those will be contract management, because all other municipalities, they are into different contracts. We don't know how long they are running. We have tried to do that desktop exercise so that we can then be able to quantify, to say how much will the system cost us if we are going to have it as a, what is the English word again? If we are as a pilot, how long will it run? How much will it cost? And then all those other things. So all I'm trying to say is that we have worked long ago with your CETA here in the province, trying to come with one system that could not be realized as well, because you would also understand that each and every municipality is autonomous and it has its own SCM processes, which we cannot dictate to. But from our side, as voice of local government, SALGA is saying, if we can have one system and say we work together, that will be the best that we can do. Chair, I think that is what I've tried. I'm not sure from my IT guy, Riaz or Justinia, anything you might want to add. Maybe just in a brief, I think they want to add.
Sorry, thank you. So with regards to the electronic, we know all municipalities in the province, financially, they can't always have the monetary value to develop a system. So what I've come up with for certain municipalities is I created a folder system for them to start getting used to being able to scan documents, index, reference. And I've done it in conjunction with the current municipal file plan. So as of that, we then took one municipality, which was Hantam, which sits in Calvinia, and we then transferred the skill to the lady that actually sits in the registry. And I think that we don't take credit for it, but Hantam has actually gotten a clean audit for the last 2 years, because they were able to now actually come up with the records when the auditors came to the municipality. I'm also taking that exact full system, and I'm now starting to try and pull it into SharePoint to customize it so that it can become a fully fledged records management / knowledge management system for municipalities who doesn't necessarily have the funding to actually purchase a system. Thank you.
To just add on to that, I would say it's very evident that there's a gradual shift happening in the way people do record keeping across the province. There's different stages of maturity. Some municipalities just work by hand and do manual filing, whereas some are in the transition of going electronic. But I think where we start is we look at the various policies, such as your email policies, and look where you can strengthen those links and make the transition a bit more smoother towards an electronic system. Hence, IT kicks in and we make sure that the folders are ready for those that are ready to upload and get their documents digital and on a computer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's good that something is happening. There should be a way of checking progress so that at least after a particular period, we have feedback on the direction. Because if we don't have a tool, if we don't have time frame in whatever that we do, we might find ourselves doing something for third IR while we are getting to a fifth IR. So yeah, I think you are on the right track. Well, if you are, Johan, if you are not satisfied, please talk to each other. I'm no longer going to give any opportunity to question Salga, and because already Mr. Mayor did say something and is recorded, I'm no longer going to open for him to scrutinize his presentation. You know why I'm doing this? We've been sitting for a long time. And then I'll only give one hand to Advocate Marke, only one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Tabo. 2 questions to the good advocate. The first one, advocate made mention of the fact that there's an amount of 2 million set aside by his department to assist with legislation. We are requesting as SALGA that POPI, or Protection of Personal Information Act 4 of 2013 be added. And the reason for that is because of we are sitting with municipalities that, one, do not have do not have information and deputy information officers. 2, we are sitting with municipalities that have not registered with the information regulator. We are sitting with municipalities that are non-compliant with the act. It can be argued differently that no, POPI falls under the information regulator, it's not your baby. But if you have money, why can't we spend it? So the request is, let us have municipalities assisted, perhaps maybe start a pilot per project, per province, and see how we can be assisted, because I can tell you, if you had to get the information regulator to go and do an audit, you'll be shocked. Lastly, the second question, then I'm done. Appointment of records managers. COGSTA has realized that, or COGTA had realized that the appointment of senior managers, accounting officers, CFOs, director corporate services, it was not organized. So they came with regulations. So we are appealing that let us also follow that route from your department, put regulations to say if municipality has so much budget and it needs to appoint a records manager, at least have a degree in this field, so many years of experience, and let there be professional affiliation. I know that Prof. Maruta here and the program director, they are part of SASA, not SASA that gives pension, but the South African Society of Archivists. So if we can also regulate that professional affiliation so that you cannot have a records manager who gets appointed to a municipality who is not qualified, not less than 5 years management experience, also who is not professionally affiliated with SASA. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Respond, Advocate Korten Gebondeg.
Okay, thank you, Thabo. On the first issue, we are going to be entering into a memorandum of agreement, Chairperson and council members, with the information regulator, so that we can regulate whatever is happening in this space where we are belonging. We will actually, we are running out of time by now because the act is just next month will be now a year old or so. So by now we should have already entered into that MOA, and we will address these issues of the registration of information and deputy information officers. But then there will be other issues that we will also put into that MOU or MOA, issues like the issue of the code of conduct and et cetera, et cetera. But then since the National Archives together with the information regulator are actually dealing with the information society as one of the people. I'm putting just a big umbrella name to say information sector, so that no one gets left behind. Those from galleries, those from libraries, those from archives, and those from museums. So that MOA will address all those kind of concerns. But then we had the first public meeting with the information regulator. Now I can't remember which month was it. Maybe it was last month. Was it May? Yes, but then we felt that because in the platform we had over 400 people, chairperson, we felt that that is not enough. It was an initial interaction between the National Archives together with all the records managers, information workers in the whole country. We need to have extensive kind of engagement, training, etc., etc. Chair. But then we will inform all of you as to when this will happen. To come to the amendment that Thabo was talking about, as indicated, we will accept all submissions from all stakeholders when we are starting to deal with amendments. Everyone needs to be to come on board. We know that the period of 6 months is a short period, but there are ways in which an extension can be made if we feel that the sample, as Dr. Maruta will tell you, that whenever they're doing research, you have a sample and then afterwards you realize that actually that sample is not representative. Then we may ask an extension of the period to say these people in Kakamas there in the corners of the Northern Cape have not been reached. We haven't heard from them. So probably we need an extension of another 6 months so that everyone or every voice gets heard and submissions are received. We sit through them, work through them, and ensure that the new act which will come dealing with this community addresses all the issues. Mr. Nkatingi, our chair today, last week or so, when there were inaugurations of the council, indicated that our act needs to have teeth, need to bite, so that people, they realize that whenever we have those strong rooms or those storage areas that are littered with the chaos that Mr. Thabo was talking about, there needs to be something that will happen. You have seen when I was dealing with penalties under PAIA, that when you falsify information, when you hide information, etc., number of things, that there will be consequences. So we need to borrow from those kind of legislation that we are dealing with to make our National Archives Act that will be amended to be stronger, so that when the National Archives appears, people can take us as serious as they do when they deal with the Auditor General. People, all municipalities, they will tell you that when the Auditor General comes, they ensure that all those records that are like the queries about, they are there, they conform to everything else that is required. But when it comes to National Archives Act, people drag their feet, they don't comply, and my colleague Tuli during the week spoke about people who will be migrating to, for example, to the cloud system. To say when you are intending of migrating to the cloud system, or when you are taking your records to offsite storage, you need to make an application to the National Archivist. People don't do that. You all know yourselves. You just go and contract with whoever, or you go to Johan, okay, maybe Johan because it's a stake, it's CETA, then it is better. But you go to other software makers in the country to go and ask them to digitize your records without getting the permission of the National Archivist or without notifying the National Archivist. And when records are lost, then you start coming to us. So we will ensure that this act that is coming has teeth in that day. Chairperson, thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, I'm closing virtually and in our room today. I want to thank the presenters and all of you. If it wasn't the presenters and you physically in this room and virtually, we wouldn't be having a successful 9th-day archives week. But because of you, I call it success what I see. Thank you so much. It was a little bit strenuous. We didn't take any health break. I'm sorry about that. But I thank you. We have come to the end of our day 9. Thank you so much. Food is ready. I don't know who's supposed to close it officially. Is it you?
I know it's
Myself. Oh, do I have those powers? By the powers which have just been vested on me, day 9 is officially closed. Thank you. Correction, is not day 9. It's day 4, but on the 9th. Thank you. Day 8. Day 4 on the 8th.
Kodwa yekho sabela senze ngashaya nezwi ngimemeza